are live.
Welcome to the Sunset Safari. As you can see, a magnificent breeding herd of elephants. I've just had a nice drink in the Djuma pan, and they're now moving out and spreading through the bush to start feeding. I have Gendre on camera. My name is Brent Smith, and I'm back from leave. We have Jamie and Dangerous Dave out on the other vehicle, and we have, who have we got in final control? Kirsten and Geraldine. And we also got some very special guests join us on this safari. We've got 2 schools from Virginia and our English class and our biology class. So we're going to be mixing up a bit of English and a bit of biology for tonight's Sunset Safari for the first hour or so. And I think let's start with an English. So to the English class, I've got a very nice English question for you. Since we are driving past this beautifully large herd of elephants, who can tell me what the original English colloquial collective noun is for a group of elephants? We often refer to them as herds now, but there was a wonderfully pompous old colonial name for them, and if any of you have ever read Rudyard Kipling, he utilizes that collective noun to great effect in some of his short stories and books. But we're going to stop with this little section of the herd here. Hello, guys. And remember, if you want to send your answers through to that, it's questions@WildEarthTV or #SafariLive. Okay, so we'll just keep very still when the Ellies come close to us like this. Normally just go around us like they are here. Now, an elephant, for the biology students out there, is quite an interesting animal because it's big and it's dark. And big and dark things aren't supposed to do too well in the heat. Yet it's one of the only animals that we'll find moving around on absolutely scorching days like today. It's 37 degrees Celsius, 98 degrees Fahrenheit. And the reason they are able to do that is they have a magnificent air conditioning system. And you can see there, those large ears, and we'll wait till she flaps it, you'll be able to see the large network of veins and arteries in her ear. So what happens, the blood is pumped from the rest of the body into those ears, and then she flaps them, it cools the blood, and sends it through to the rest of the body. And that's one of the ways elephants have adapted to deal with the heat like we experience at this very moment. Okay, so the herd's moving through, and this is not uncommon. After they've had a drink, they spread out. When they move towards a waterhole, they're often in quite tight formation heading through, but now they'll probably spread out over an area of about 3 or 4 football fields and feeding in different little family nucleus groups. And on the edge, you'll often find young bulls because they're quite boisterous, especially the teenagers, especially because they're full of testosterone. They tend to cause a bit of trouble with the females who've got young babies, so they tend to keep those young bulls right on the edge. And speaking of 2 of the terrible troublemakers that are on the peripheries, there's 2 of them on their way in now. So they would have hung around for a little bit more fun at the waterhole for a little bit longer. And now they'll just hang around on the edge feeding. So we're going to leave those little boys, and we've got a question from Tyree, who's wondering if that big female who was very close to us was pregnant. It looked like she had a big belly. She wasn't. She actually had a little baby with her that was probably just over a year old. You could see her mammary glands or her teats were highly enlarged, and so she's lactating, producing milk. Not pregnant, she's already had the baby. And elephants actually have the longest gestation period out of any mammal, and it's 22 months. So imagine that. They have to carry around that baby for an incredibly long time, and just think how big those babies are when they're born, even though they look quite cute. Oh, there's a little one. That one's probably, again, just over a year as it disappears off into the thorn thicket there. Maybe closer to 2 years, that one. But they have to carry around that incredible weight. And even a newborn baby elephant probably weighs more than most of you do at home. And here are the little boys, just slowly moving through. So there you go, this one of the young boys is heading towards the thickets where we just saw that baby disappear, and there's another young boy off to the left here who's a little bit young. He should be staying a bit closer to mom, and he's going to come into frame shortly. There we go. So that's a young bull, and he's more than likely, I would guess, around 8 or 9 years old. So not one of the terrible teens, a little bit too young to be hanging too far from the rest of the herd. And if he got abandoned or confused and left behind, he is sort of a size a pride of lions might think about taking on in this area. Very unusual behavior, that. Now, Ms. Singer has asked a question regarding the Ellie's ears, and I'm not quite sure. I assume she means where you can see on the front side of the ear there's a sort of roll in there, and that's actually their ear. You can see that hole there. So actually it's just that top area that sort of folds over, and she's wondering why that is. Well, you'll probably find the cartilage is just not as strong there, and you can also see there are some quite nice large veins in that area, and they probably flow just under there. And I don't think there's any particular evolutionary adaptation for that little rollover. An elephant's ear is made up of a layer of cartilage, and I just think on the edges it's not as strong, and it folds over. Obviously, it doesn't happen on the bottom because the bottom is already facing downwards. So it's just, I think, the edge of the cartilage not being as strong as the center. Yes, we're talking about you, mister. Oh, Bailey's wondering why I called those young bulls troublemakers. Well, Bailey, the main reason is that they've got a lot of testosterone and androgen. Just watch behind you there, Jean-Ray. He's coming to give you a look. So he's just watching Jean-Ray on the camera. Okay, he's going to walk past now. So they've got a lot of testosterone. So an elephant bull probably reaches sexual maturity at between 12 and 14 years old. He's unable to mate till he's about 30, though. So there's a lot of sort of confused feelings, let's put it that way. And so they tend to be quite boisterous and running in charge. And of course, when you've got small babies around, sometimes they might just sort of get in the way. I think more than anything else, they just really irritate the adult females. So they tend to push them towards the peripheries of the herd. But they're not quite brave enough to go off by themselves yet. Very much like a human child, would rather stay closer to mom for as long as possible, even though mom is probably up to here with all of them. But let's move on. Those Ellies are going to disappear. So while we try catch up with this elephant herd, let's jump on board with Jamie, who's got a grey beast of a much smaller variety.
And good afternoon, everyone, and especially warm good afternoon to these lovely warthogs that have spent the day in the waterhole, and across to the buffalo bull that is guarding his spot closely and fiercely in this little pan. And on a hot, boiling hot day in Africa, the waterhole is apparently the place to be. Brent was with the Ellies at the one. I've got some buffalo and a lovely warthog family at the other. Look at them having a little scuffle there. Pigs dashing around. So you were with Brent and you were chatting a little bit, and I'll say a warm welcome to the students of Lansdowne as well as Green Run. I hope that you're enjoying your safari experience so far. I hear that some of you have been studying African folk tales, and I just thought I'd chat a little bit about the warthog, and there's two wonderful ones that I want to share with you while we watch them. You watch them crouching down on their knees. So the first one is a story that hails from a local Zulu culture about why it is that the warthogs eat on their knees or feed on their knees. And the story goes that the warthog was once a handsome creature that was very friendly and very charismatic, and he happened to make friends with the lion, with the lion's wife, the lioness. And this friendship persisted for many months in secret until the lion found out and was furious, at which point the warthog desperately bowed down in supplication to the lion, the great lion, saying, "Please don't eat me." And that's why now they continually go about on their knees. For those of you interested, I'm going to put it to you as a question as to why, in fact, they feed on their knees. What advantage might that give them? And hello, by the way, my name is Jamie. I also have Dave on camera with me, just to let you all, fill you all in on our whole system and setup. We sit with a cameraman on the back, and he brings you all of the action. So back to our little warthog family before they do decide to disappear. You can see they've all been wallowing in the mud. I'm sure Brent has commented on just how hot it is this afternoon. Oh, and you can see where the mud mallows marks are. Now that is the way that the animals get away or get cool on a hot afternoon like this afternoon. And Keegan and Caesar were both wondering a little bit from a personal level, how do we deal with the heat? And the answer is it's amazing how adaptable human beings as a species are. Most of us have grown up in this kind of weather and in this kind of climate. These kinds of days, yes, we all feel exceptionally warm. And yes, we do. I mean, I'm sweating at the moment. As human beings, we sweat naturally. I'm used to this climate. I lived in the UK for 3 years, and I absolutely froze for 3 years, and I was still wearing jerseys and jumpers on days when my friends were walking around in t-shirts. So your body adapts and decides how it's going to approach the situations or the temperature situations that we deal with. We also have water sprayers. Sleeping at night is always the tricky one. So what you do is you wrap yourself in a wet towel or a wet kukoi, whatever you happen to find, and that is your general approach to cooling down. We're also incredibly fortunate in that we have a swimming pool. I'm not sure whether Brent mentioned, but an elephant, just before we started to go live, an elephant made its way back into the garden and appeared to be thinking very carefully about having a drink at our swimming pool. Definitely a wild life that we live. Our little piglets are wandering through, and I just wanted to show you something around their faces. Something that I always find incredibly interesting about warthogs. Those little tufts of white hair around their cheek. You see, they're not at the mature stage yet, where they have developed their tusks. You can see the tusks just starting to poke through. Like elephants, those are modified incisor teeth that are growing. And the tufts of white fur along the cheeks are actually meant to imitate fully grown tusks, as a way of making them seem slightly more threatening for any predators. Now this family originally, there's 2 females with 4 piglets. Originally, there were 6 of them when we first started seeing them in this area. There's now 4 of them. I know of at least one that was taken by a leopard because we happened to see him eating the warthog piglet. I'm not sure where the other one went, but it probably has also succumbed to the possibility of a leopard attack. They are definitely on the leopard's menu of favorite food. And as our warthog, I know Brent was talking about collective nouns for elephants, as our warthog sounder moves off into the bush, let's jump back onto Brent's vehicle and find out what he's found.
So we're just getting in position with these ellies again, and I've got lovely little one here is a year old. Looks like a little boy. There we go. And you can see he's sort of mastered the use of his trunk already. Not quite to the degrees of an adult. And it takes the little Ellies a couple of months to really get the hang of it. And you see very young ones don't really know what they're doing. They're unable to pick a little leaflet like he's doing at the moment. But we are experiencing the worst drought in South Africa since 1991 and 1992. Now, a lot of people consider this a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And I'm just going to ask Chandra to go a little bit wider. You can actually see how the elephants are really opening up the bush. Now, on a very short term, this is beneficial to quite a lot of other animals. They bring down food that a lot of other animals wouldn't have been able to reach. On a long term, it's going to remove a lot of the smaller shrubs and bushes that have been growing for the last 10 or 15 years. We've had a very wet 10 or 15 years. Now, what happens is these bush encroach on the grass, and grass is actually far more important to a lot of animal species than trees are. And once we do end this drought, a lot of these smaller brushes and shrubs would have been removed, and it'll actually make more space for grass to grow, which will actually help increase animal populations. And this is one of those wonderful ways nature works so well. And drought is nature's way of controlling certain animal species as well, particularly your bigger species. So animals that generally get really hit hard by drought are elephants, buffalo, rhino, to a lesser degree wildebeest, zebra. Oh, look at him. Really enjoying that little sickle bush. And that, in a really, really wet year, is something an elephant wouldn't feed on. So Naya is wondering, are the elephants safe from being attacked, both by human beings and natural predators? Well, as animals go, you're about as safe as you can be being an elephant from natural predators. In this part of the world, it's very unusual for lions to hunt elephants, but if they happen to come on a situation like this, a little baby elephant who's now not too far, but 100 or so feet away from the other adults, they might think about it, but in a drought situation like this, they've got so much food, the lions do, that it's unlikely that they would attempt a risky thing. As soon as that elephant screams, the rest of the herd will come to its aid, and a lion does not want to tag with an adult female elephant. And from a human point of view, where we are now, they're actually very, very safe from any form of attack. We have very little elephant poaching in South Africa as a whole. Other parts of Africa, elephants are under threat, but in South Africa, the population is actually growing, actually to a point where in certain national parks, they're beginning to worry that we've got too many elephants, which is bad for the ecosystem in whole. Lauren is wondering, are the elephant and warthog tusks bones? They are not. They are a tooth. So they're a modified incisor, if I remember correctly. So it's a teeth, so it's enamel. It's the same as any other tooth. So Eddies are moving off here. We're going to try and see if we can reposition again shortly. This little guy is about to wander off to join Mom. There he goes. Oh, he suddenly realized how far Mom got away. He got a fright. Where's my mother? We might hear a little trumpet. No? I thought he might have a little complaint to Mom when he caught up. Let's go have a look at what else these Eddies are up to. Hello, little man. young bull over here, busy tearing up a bush willow. And Anthony, welcome on the safari today, Anthony. And he would like to know, when is the breeding season for elephants and warthogs? Well, elephants don't have a particular breeding season. They can breed throughout the year. Warthogs, however, do. And they will always give birth in sort of December, January. Oh, the wind's just picked up. And there was some storm clouds around, so maybe we'll get a bit of rain later. But it would be very, very welcome. So the warthogs have a gestation period of about 7 months. So my maths is horrific, but if I go back from November, so probably actually March, April would be breeding season for warthogs once those little piglets have got a bit bigger. No, sorry, I lie. June would be breeding season for the warthogs. So we're going to move on, see if we can catch up with the rest of the herd. While we do that, we're going to jump back on board with Jamie, who's got a traffic-legged antelope for you. And when we get back, we'll do an African folk story on elephants.
Just sneaking up really quietly. I don't want to startle the little one. We've got a baby kudu walking straight across the road in front of us. Wonderful, graceful little antelope. And in a moment, when it comes through, it should actually join the mother. It's a little bit off to our right, even behind there. Just to give you an idea of just how tiny and new these little ones are. And since I have found some kudu, I just have to tell you, I think my favorite, hands down, the folk story about kudu and their cousins in Yala. This little one looking at us with radar ears. It's hiding in the bushes there. The story goes, and this was actually shared by one of our viewers, a lady named Teresa. And she actually told us the story of how the idea was, or the local legend goes, that kudu's legs were too skinny to hold them upright. And so the creator reached down and picked them up. And wherever there is white on a kudu or their cousins in Yala, that is where they were touched by the creator. There you go, there's mom, or at least one of their mothers. An animal perfectly adapted for hiding away in thick vegetation, just like this. Large ears to amplify every sound that they hear, and very, very good eyesight. Eyes positioned on the side of their head to take in as much of their surroundings as possible. And watch how when they walk, even at a young age, very often they walk with their ears backwards so that they can hear whatever is hiding or whatever might be sneaking up behind them. Definitely one of my favorite antelope species. I'm going to see if I can get you one more view of them, just because those little ones are terribly sweet. And while I try and shift back to see if we can get a view, I don't think we're going to, in which case I'll move forward towards the giraffe. Shay was wondering, when did I start having a passion for wildlife? I'm just going to turn my radio down. Sorry, Shay. Shay, the answer is, I don't even remember when I started my passion for wildlife. I think it was probably, my earliest memory is of being in the Kruger National Park with my grandfather, and apparently I was about 2 years old at the time. And I remember sitting on a big bridge, one of those bridges that you can actually get out on, and I remember a lion walking past the window. I remember being so phenomenally excited about this. It was just the most incredible thing to 2-year-old me, and I remember thinking that that was very, very big. And it carried on from there. I'd been on quite a few family holidays to the bush. My grandfather used to be a game warden, so at one point in his life he did sort of run and organize reserves in the area. This is one of his favorite places in the country. So even though I grew up in Johannesburg, which is one of our biggest cities, definitely our highest populated city, the love of wildlife and the thrill of wildlife has been with me from a very early age. And it is a very lucky thing in life. It is a very fortunate thing in life to be able to do something that you love in the same way that we get to do. I never wake up in the morning and dread having to get up and go to work. Always something that comes with the excitement of a new day. And there's not everyone gets to say that in their life, so I'm very aware of how grateful I should be for that. Okay, try and get you a view of these giraffe. There's some giraffe there, quite far away. I can actually loop around to get closer, but I'll just show you where I mean. Just come through here. Also got a huge herd of impala. There's the giraffe all the way over there. You can see his head sticking up. Munching away. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you across so you can jump on the back of Brent's vehicle, and I'm going to loop around and get a bit closer to this giraffe for you.
So, well, I said I would tell you an African folklore when I got back, and it's a particularly pertinent one since we have seen both warthog and elephant on this sunset safari. Warthogs with Jamie and elephant with us still. It is called the kindly aardvark. Now, I know we're talking about elephants and warthogs, and I'm throwing an aardvark into the mix. So it's a Kikuyu story, so it's not actually from South Africa, it's from well north of us in East Africa. The Kikuyu live mostly in Kenya, and in the old days, warthog and aardvark were best friends, and they used to spend a lot of time chatting. And aardvark inadvertently heard how elephant coveted warthog's tusks, and in those days, elephant had the smallest tusks, and warthog had a massive, beautiful pair of tusks. And even though they were quite difficult for warthog to move around with, he was incredibly proud. Now, warthog is a bit of a forgetful animal. So aardvark warned warthog that the elephant was after its tusks. And some weeks went past, and warthog was happily grazing away, and he came across the elephant. The elephant was being very nice, and warthog was very sort of in awe. Well, let's have a quick look while these eddies are going to disappear into a thick drainage line. A drainage line is a sort of creek bed, a dry creek bed, and very thick, so we're not going to follow them in there. Here we go. So warthog had forgotten that aardvark had warned him that elephant was after his tusks. So after all the flattery that elephant had bestowed upon warthog, spending the whole day even helping warthog dig out some luscious tubers and roots, elephant then said, well, your tusks are so magnificent, could I just try them for a very, very short time, and I'll give them straight back. And warthog, being the kindly soul that it is, happily did so. And as soon as elephant had placed those tusks into its face, it went and looked at itself in the water hole and thought, my goodness, don't I look just smashing? And then went back and beat warthog when he tried to ask for his tusks back. So warthog dejectedly put elephant's little tusks into his mouth, and he went home with his tail between his legs. Oh, we've got some more elephants coming to join the others. Oh, isn't that nice? And on warthog, on his way home, he met aardvark and told aardvark the sad story and bemoaned the fact that he couldn't remember aardvark's warning about warthog trying to get those tusks. Nice camera work, Jean-Jay, sticking on the tusks. And aardvark said, don't worry, my friend. From now on, you will always have a home to hide in from hunters, and elephant will have to move across the savannah, and people will covet those tusks, and you shall be safe, and you can live in a burrow underground. And warthog said, but how is that so, aardvark? I am not a great digger. And Art Fox said, don't worry, I dig so many holes and they're all over the place and I'm always making new ones, that you are welcome to you live in any hole that I have made. And since that day, Art Fox and Warthog remain very good friends and all live in the same burrows, while Elephant has to wander without a home and protect his tusks from the others who covered them. And it's a nice little Kikuyu folklore from East Africa. So those ellies are moving down. I think there might be a few more left up here. We're going to see if we can move around towards them. And while we do that, for the English class out there, we've just done a folklore, and now we'll do a few more collective nouns, since no one has answered the elephant collective noun yet. But we're going to go across to Jamie, who's got a dazzle and a journey.
Here we go. I set off to find giraffe, and I happened to come across some zebra as well. So 2 for 1 in this particular deal, because just to their left is Africa and the world's tallest animal at 5 odd meters, which puts it well over 15 feet. And there you go. We've got a dazzle of zebra and one sad little part of a journey. There is actually a second giraffe here, but she hasn't decided to make her way into view just yet. And I say her, it is a female, quite a dark in color female. Her on the top of her ossicones, the horns on top of her head. You can see that tongue that she's sticking out there and to wrap around the leaves is incredibly dexterous and versatile, and can reach up to 1/2 meter in length, so about 1.5 feet. That tongue can extend to. I've seen them pick their noses with it even. It's a great way of reaching and catching leaves that are harder to reach. But interestingly enough, that long neck, according to what most evolutionary biologists are now arguing, is not an advantage in terms of reaching up for the higher leaves. It's actually evolved as a fighting mechanism amongst males, a way of competing with each other for access to the females. And the females just happen to have them as a part of the sort of the natural evolutionary process. The longer the neck, and I don't know if any of you have ever seen videos of giraffe fighting, but they swing their heads at each other and hit each other on the sides and the rump and the legs. You can imagine the momentum of a 12-kilogram skull, which for you students is close over 25 pounds worth of head on the end of a 2-meter neck. Makes for an incredibly powerful force. So for years, I know certainly I was raised into believing that a giraffe's long neck was an evolutionary design. I'm just going to move forward for to catch the second giraffe moving in. Was a way of the giraffe being able to reach up to the higher trees, and it's only now that we're starting to realize that this isn't the case. Here we go, which are nice and clearly. Much lighter in color. So, hey young Kim, you were wondering about the purpose that the horns serve in a giraffe. And you were wondering, is it determined by their sex? Is it part of camouflage, or is it for fighting? And here's a female with very, very thin ossicones with the tufts of hair on top of them. Now there's actually what looks like a male behind her as well, which makes for a really nice comparison and the answer to your question. There he is at the back there. So the top of a male's ossicones are rubbed bald. They have hardly any tufts of hair, and they're probably about double the width or double the radius of that of a female giraffe, which tells us almost immediately, hello girl, that they very much are used as a fighting tool. And females very seldom use them as any way of protecting themselves or their offspring. Instead, they kick at any kind of threat, like a lion or a leopard that might decide to challenge them. But for males, those horns on the top of their head, and they're not true horns, because although they are bone, they are not covered in a keratin sheath, which is why I keep calling them ossicones. It's the official name for them. Males, they are much wider, much thicker, and they, as I mentioned earlier, during a process known as necking, they will fight each other and swing their heads with their ossicones on them. And if you look at it, it's one of the differences between males and females. Apart from the width of those ossicones, the males also have very predominant lumps on the tops of their skulls and behind the ossicones, so just behind at the base of the skull, so that no matter what angle their head connects with as they swing it round and hit each other with, it will still cause some damage, and they can seriously injure each other. And what I would suggest you do, if you're interested in it, is go and have a look at videos of them fighting, possibly even in slow motion. There are a couple of them out there, and just have a look at the impact that they hit each other with. And then you start to understand how biologists have come to that conclusion, that it's actually, rather than a feeding tool to help them compete for higher access to food, might actually be a reproductive tool, a competitive and reproductive tool. It's the same explanation offered for those, for the dinosaurs with long necks. So Diplodocus and Brachiosaurus, scientists are beginning to equate the two. And it's one of those interesting things, because no matter how much we learn about the area that we're in, we're still not going to know everything. And I'm coming up to the zebra to give you a sort of point in an example. The stripes have always believed to have been entirely camouflage driven. And yes, to a certain extent, as we look through the bushes, as the zebra moves through, you can see that it works. You can see it could act to disrupt the vision of a predator, even at this distance. Have you spotted the zebra yet? Yep, there he is. But now people are starting to think about the theories behind either thermoregulation, so hot stripes, the black stripes heating up and the white stripes not heating up as much and creating microcurrents, or the dominant theory is that it interferes with the landing proprioception of flies like tsetse flies that would land on them and possibly pass on a disease like sleeping sickness. But the truth is, nobody knows, and nobody actually agrees on what zebra stripes are for. One of the things I love the most about here is that everything is a mystery. And a very big hello to the Lansdowne School Division Central Office and Dr. Matney. A warm welcome to our safari this afternoon. I'm glad that the animals decided to cooperate. It's always touch and go on a hot afternoon like this afternoon, but they never fail to stun us and surprise us and make an appearance. I'm glad that they did, and I'm also mostly glad that the rain that's been threatening all day is held off for now. We need it, of course, and it is coming, but I'm glad that it could hold off for the 45 minutes we needed it to. Just try and give you a nice perspective of both the giraffe and the zebra. There we go. And I chatted a bit about giraffe fighting each other, and China in Virginia, who was wondering if I've ever seen giraffe fight and why would they do that. And the answer is yes, I have. I've seen it many times. Most of the time it's been a fairly playful sparring between two young males, but I have seen serious competition between large males, and that only really happens when there's a female that is in estrus, so she's ready to mate and bear offspring. And the reason they fight for her is because their main mission, or one of their main missions in life, most organisms in fact, is to reproduce, to continue the species. I'm just going to try and see, since they've vanished behind the trees, if there is a male still visible. Let's drive as I answer this question and just see if he's going to pop his head out. So every species on Earth's goal is to reproduce. And the same goes for giraffe or zebra or anything like that. And a lot of the time the males compete for the access to females, the access and the right to mate. Some animals have territories, and that's how they keep their mating rights, by keeping a territory that will attract a female and allow him to have sole access to that female. But in the case of giraffe, they don't have territories. So if two males come upon a female together, then they fight it out to see who gets to mate with her. And a lot of the time that can be a process over a couple of days, so they need to keep up that performance. But what that means for the female is that her offspring is getting the best genetic range possible as a father. So he's proved himself. Where did this male giraffe go? Surely I cannot lose a 900-kilogram giraffe. I'm sure he was here, Dave. I wasn't imagining him. So fighting means that from a biological perspective, the strongest individual gets to pass on the strongest possible genes. And it's one of the reasons why, although this drought is going to be heartbreaking, and we are in the middle of a very serious drought, I really did lose a 900-kilogram giraffe. That's quite impressive. He must have snuck past me. Where did you go, buddy? Nope, he's vanished. Now, the giraffe females that we saw were mature cows. Emily was wondering how long can a giraffe live? How old will they live to be? And Emily, the answer is generally around 20 or so. They can live a bit longer in captivity, and it depends on the circumstances. Some of them, like that male, have magical powers of invisibility or something, because he's completely vanished. He must have cut around us. But since we're here, here's a fun animal for us to look at. Emily, an age range of about 15 to 20, some longer than others. But I want to stop and show you these birds, because I promise you, you'll never look at Jurassic Park the same way again. As you all know, dinosaurs are considered to have birds are considered to have evolved pretty much straight from the dinosaur line. Watch the way these guinea fowl move and see if it reminds you of anything. Because the creators of Jurassic Park and those responsible for the CGI and the effects of the dinosaurs, they based the way that the Tyrannosaurus Rex and the Velociraptors run and walk on guinea fowl. And in fact, they used a lot of the vocal ranges from African birds as well. So the screeching came from vultures, as well as the deep rumbling sounds of elephants. Fascinatingly colored little bird. As they wander off across the clearing, I'm going to say goodbye to all of the students of Lansdowne and Green Run. It's been wonderful having you on board. I do hope that you have enjoyed every moment of it. And for your last few minutes, I'm going to send you back onto the vehicle with Brent, and I hope to see you again in the future. Cheers, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Welcome back, and we've got a lovely question from Princess. Hi, Princess. Princess would like to know another folk story and what's my favorite one. Princess, that is a very difficult question. I have many favorite folklores from Africa, from all different parts of Africa. I think possibly we might have time for two. One of my favorites is actually more of a folk joke than a folk lore. And it's from the Mbogush, the river bushmen that are up in northern Botswana, through to northern Namibia into southern Angola. And it's about the hippopotamus. And I don't know if any of you have ever heard a hippo and what noise it makes. He sort of sits there and goes, So what the Mbogush say, you never know whether the hippo is the best joker in the bush or the worst joker in the bush, because they make that noise as soon as they come up, often from being under the water. So they say they tell each other the joke under the water, and when they come up, they laugh. But you never know if they're laughing because the joke is so funny. or they're laughing at you because you don't know the joke. I think that's one of my favorites. It's more of a fun one than a serious one. Most of the African folklores and stuff do have a moral to the story. So I think we'll do that one as last, and it's about the greedy hunter. And that is a Zulu folklore, and I grew up quite a bit in northern Zululand, and basically there was a very lazy hunter who saw a female cheetah with 3 cubs, and she had killed an impala, and he was watching from the bushes, and he saw what a good hunter the cheetah was. So when Mom went off to go get a drink, he stole the cubs, and eventually the cheetah cried so much she gets those black tear marks down her face. And one of the Zulu elders asked the cheetah, why are you crying so much? And it was because she'd lost her cubs, and eventually they figured out it was the naughty hunter, the lazy hunter, who had stolen her cubs, causing a cheetah to get its tear marks. And the moral of the story is that hunter was then banished, and it was to never be greedy. That's always a good one to remember. And on that note, it's been great having you guys with us. I hope you learnt something, and if you didn't, I hope you at least had a little bit of fun. Otherwise, hopefully we'll see you quite soon, and we're going to continue on. Hopefully, Jean-Andre has already been pestering me to try find some lions and leopards on my first drive back, so that's what I'm going to do. So, as I said, Jean-Andre has been pestering me to find some lions and leopards, and of course I would love to, because it's International Women's Day, and wouldn't it be fitting if we found one of our sleek female cats of the bush for the day. So I'm going to have a quick gander around the western sectors, see if I can find any tracks of Madame Shadow, who I haven't seen in an age, so I always love to catch up with the leopards if I haven't seen them in a while. So it's very interesting, we had such big cloud build-up just before we went live. We actually even got a few spatterings of rain. We got a little bit worried, for the drive, but hopefully we do get rain after drive tonight. There are some massive cumulus clouds building all around in the sky. I'll try to get to some high ground to show you, but unfortunately the area where our weather normally comes from, which is the west, is not looking so productive. There's a couple of little clouds, but nothing big. Everything seems to be further north and further east of us at the moment. But during my leave, I did quite a bit of traveling, and to the east of us could definitely use rain, definitely more than we can. They've had less rain than we have in the Kruger National Park. Now, there's been quite a lot of debate. Recently, Kruger closed a lot of water holes. And the reason is this, because they were man-made water holes, and they have actually, to a degree, changed animal behavior. And recently, they have now agreed to open certain water holes. These water holes are not man-made water holes. They're not sinking boreholes again. What they're doing is they're going to the perennial rivers, the large sand rivers, such as the Wensinsoto, and a lot of those are around the central area of the park. Now, the eddies are still managing to dig up water there, and there is quite a lot of water just below the surface. This is the first year of the drought, so that the water table hasn't been that adversely affected yet. So what they're doing is they're actually digging water holes where there is actually naturally occurring underground water that would have been dug up by elephants, but obviously just on a bit of a bigger scale. Now, that of course will help with the water, but grazing is also a huge problem. And a lot of you who watch a lot of the Kruger Park sightings boards and all that stuff, there's quite a lot of misinformation flying around on those things about drought and whatnot, because I met someone in Hoedspruit recently who just been through the park, and apparently all the buffaloes are dead. But while I was in the park, I saw a herd of over 1,000 looking quite happy and healthy up in the north. So very interesting sort of little bit of stats to give you an idea why drought is not always the worst thing. So I've spoken about that drought in 91, 92 being the worst in the last sort of 50 years. The at that time, the Kruger buffalo population was around 35,000. And at the end of that drought, they were down to 12,000. So obviously a mass die-off. And that 12,000 were left were of the most supreme genetic stock. The biggest, the fittest, the strongest. Now, since end of 92, the end of the drought, through to now, the park's buffalo population has done even better. So they're around 48,000 now, and in similar conditions in 91, already sort of 5 or 6,000 had already died by this stage, and we're looking at only 1,000 now. So on average, those strong genetics have won through, and we probably are going to use a few thousand buffalo if this drought continues. But we must also remember we're going to gain quite a few lions and hyenas and other predators, because the predators' numbers will come up. And we must remember, drought is natural, as much as it is very difficult. And if you're in a bush and in an open ecosystem like we are, with 3.9 million hectares, over 8 million acres of unfenced wilderness, that those numbers that might seem quite catastrophic on the small scale are not that bad if you're talking about the meta population or the whole population and the health of the ecosystem as a whole. So the other thing is the elephants will be clearing out a lot of these small shrubs and bushes as they get more desperate for food. And when we do get rain, that'll increase that area's grass capacity, which will help those animals bounce back much quicker once the drought is over. But of course, there's a lot of different things and lots of people saying things on social media about this at the moment. You must understand also that Kruger is probably the most well-researched and run park in Africa. So I think we should let the Kruger scientists do their job, and I think that Kruger has got it very well under control at the moment. So unfortunately, no sign of any leopard tracks. So a nice hot and sweaty 98-degree Fahrenheit safari live welcome to Jennifer in Missouri. I'm sure it's definitely not that warm where you are, Jennifer. And Jennifer says in lieu of International Women's Day and the search for the feline ladies of Djuma, have I heard any updates about Queen Karula and her 2 bundles of joy? As far as I know, they were seen this morning to the property to the south of us, and she's, from what I know, keeping them in a drain pipe under the busiest road in the Sabi Sands, or she was. I don't know if she is anymore, but that is the last update, and both youngsters were looking fit and healthy, so that's really, really great news. While we continue to peruse the central sections of Djuma Private Game Reserve, let's go see what the wonderful Jamie is up to.
We are off on a search, in theory, to see if we can follow up on those wild dogs that were seen admittedly far away, but there's always that chance, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that they've decided to head across in this direction. They were seen at 3 in a row pan on Cheetah Plains, so it's a little bit of a distance away, but we can be ever hopeful. My goodness, warthogs. I was going to stop and show you the family of warthog, but they're demonstrating their usual behavior, which we haven't seen as much of in the last few weeks. They've definitely been calming down a bit around vehicles, but it's just a cloud of dust. They have raced away. Now the wind is howling this afternoon, bringing with it serious promises, actual promise of rain. I'm so excited. I think we all are on this blistering hot day. And it really is warm. It's got a very muggy feeling in the air. And I've worked out as well why I think this summer has felt so much hotter than the previous ones I've experienced in this area. And it's the fact that there's never, usually in midsummer, there's this build of tension, and yes, it's really hot during the day, but there's always that promise of a thunderstorm, and it breaks that temperature cycle, and it just gets so much cooler straight away in the evenings. You don't have this constant high level of heat for days on end, and then the dry wind blowing at you. The promise of a storm, okay, admittedly the sun is very much out at the moment, but the promise of a storm is a very exciting one. Apparently the entire country is going to be experiencing rain right across the board. I'm thrilled. I'm really excited about that. On this International Women's Day, it's wonderful that we started off the day with the elephants, the matriarchy of the herd, but my plan is most definitely, and I have to do it on International Women's Day, to visit the only true matriarchal system in certainly our ecosystem, and probably most of the animal kingdom, and that is to, of course, go across to the hyena den. That will be planned for a little later when it's a bit cooler. Hopefully the weather holds off. Speaking about matriarchies, Debbie, who is watching in Vancouver, was wondering what are the benefits to having a matriarchal system versus the other way around. So the normal approach for most animals, for example, antelope species, it's very much male dominated. If you look at the impala, for example, the males are much larger, they dominate the females, but it's a very different social structure. Debbie, that's a really good point. Let's see, we see it mainly in elephants and spotted hyenas in this particular ecosystem. I've got a suggestion, and that is for elephants in particular. Generally, females of a species tend to live a little bit like males, and that's because the males very often compete for the attention of the females. They can kill each other, but also just in general physically. We know this is the case. Research shows that human women have a longer lifespan in general and are slightly more physically capable of dealing with things like diseases in a way. We also have a higher pain tolerance. That's a biological aspect to it. And I suppose having your family run by a consistent female that is not distracted by the need to seek out mating opportunities in different regions, but can actually focus her attention on what she's doing, which is leading her herd to safety, protecting her herd, plus forming a bond with all of the females within that group. I suppose that has its benefits. And certainly, if you compare elephant calf mortality to that of almost any other young animal, it probably must be one of the lowest of any mammal, because the elephant calf has got the protection of the herd around it. That I think would exist. Oh, let me just go through here, up onto the other side. Just one of those little signal dips. It's that aspect of live television is a natural circumstance. Right, so Debbie, I think that is one aspect. You look at the mortality rate. Look at the mortality rate as well of hyena cubs. It's also lower than that. As far as I know, it's lower than that of any other predator in the early stages of development. And then you've got the big mother theory. So the true matriarchal system, like a hyena system, the females are bigger than the males. And one of the theories behind that is because the bigger the female, the better its ability to produce milk. And one way of increasing its size is to plug the females full of testosterone and androgen to work that approach. I'm just going to go a little bit slower here. I'm looking for that poor female warthog that has not been looking very healthy at all. But she has done the most incredible job, despite the fact that she is so ill, of raising 2 piglets. And I must say, I'm full of admiration for the way that animals handle themselves in such extreme circumstances. She's very, very sick. Bones sticking out. I hope that she makes it. I'm really holding thumbs. We've got a lovely shout out on International Women's Day, and it comes from Maggie, who is in Western Australia. And Maggie sent out a shout out for inspirational woman in her life, and she mentions her friend JW, who overcame cancer. And I'm sure that we all feel exactly the same as Maggie. That's an incredible achievement. And thank you so much, Maggie, for sending through that story. I'm thinking about inspirational women in my life, just to send out my own personal one. And there's been many, but of course I have to say, since it is Women's Day, I have to say a big shout out to my mom, without whom none of the opportunities that I've had in my life would have been possible, and who has played a large role in making me who I am. So a big shout out to my mom, who is my inspirational woman of the day. But please, everybody, all the ladies out there, and gentlemen, send through your inspirational stories about women that you have met or encountered or have heard about in your lives. Another dip, might lose you through here. That seems to be okay. Ducking through the Mulwati drainage line. And speaking of inspirational females, I know that Brent chatted a little bit about Karula, but Shannon was wondering, what about Karula's daughter, Shadow? Shannon, can we hold that thought? I strongly suspect that she has cubs somewhere. I don't know where. I'm still waiting to get confirmation from the other guides. I have been in contact with friends of ours who work on Simbambili and Arathusa. And I'm going to try and clarify for you. She hasn't been seen in a while, and that could well be because she is hiding cubs somewhere. So Shannon, keep our fingers crossed. I'm fairly certain that is the case. And hopefully, in the next few weeks or months, we'll have a chance to see Shadow with her next set of cubs. Shadow, of course, in contrast to Karula, has had some really seriously bad luck when it comes to raising cubs. Whoop. Just have a quick drink. Just while we're here, for those of you who are watching the sunrise safari, we were tracking a male lion. And they did find him. They found him on Torchwood, along with 2 of the other Birmingham boys, so he did go across Cheetah Cut Line and crossed our eastern boundary. He's around. It's interesting how the Birmingham boys really seem to have split into an almost permanent 3-2 coalition. And that doesn't mean that it will stay a permanent split. They will move apart and come together as they go along. But it is pretty much what we predicted they would do once they established themselves in a territory. You hear the wind blowing across us. A little bird I haven't stopped for in a while. One that we take for granted on a fairly, you see them fairly regularly. Shame, desperately trying to, no, don't go away, birdie. Trying to balance. We've got him there, Dave. It's a fork-tailed drongo. Now we see them so frequently that I think quite often we as presenters forget to stop for them. And they really are attractive little birds, but they're also incredibly intelligent. one of the greatest mimics out here, capable of imitating all kinds of bird calls, and have been known to trick even the most experienced of birders into thinking that they are a different bird. And most of you, well, some of you may well know the story of the fork-tailed drongos in the Kalahari that have learned to imitate meerkat alarm calls. They do it in times of drought or where there's been a lack of food, and they wait until the meerkats go out foraging, and then they give the alarm call, and the meerkats drop everything and run because they think it's another meerkat that's spotted a predator, and they dash into their burrows. What's amazing about that is that meerkats have a wide variety of different alarm calls, and each one means a different thing. Off he goes. But each alarm call means something different, and the drongo has worked out that the best one to imitate is the one, because some alarm calls mean come here, there's a snake and we need to mob it, and some mean go undercover, and some mean run to the burrow. And they've worked out which one means that the meerkats will drop their food immediately and dash off to the safety of their holes. That to me is an incredible display of intelligence. We know that there are intelligent birds out there. Drongo have also been known to imitate cuckoo calls at breeding season, so the time when the cuckoos would be looking to parasitize their nests. Something like, for example, a greater spotted cuckoo parasitizes drongo nests. And what they do is they imitate, because some cuckoos can be quite territorial in the region that they work in. They imitate that call as loudly as possible, essentially as a way of sending or discouraging any other cuckoo that might be in the area from moving and laying an egg in their nests and making them hosts of the brood parasite's chick. That also to me is the most incredible approach in the arms race that has developed between cuckoos and their host species. And it's a little bird that we see all the time. Whenever there's an elephant sighting, you can pretty much guarantee that a fork-tailed drongo will be ducking and diving around, catching any insects that might have been stirred up. I'm going to stop here for a moment because we've got a very, very special shout out from 8-year-old Gracie. And 8-year-old Gracie has got a shout out on Happy Princess Day. And she said that she would like to say Happy Princess Day to her mommy, her granny, and to all of the nurses that look after her. And without them, she would be very sad. So definitely one of the most special messages that we have received. Gracie, I think that if I had to name one other inspirational woman, I would definitely list you amongst them. It was a beautiful day. Thank you, Gracie. That was a very special message. I had to stop the car for that. I'm going to take two inspirational women. One is my mom and one is Gracie on Happy Princess Day. And to all of the nurses. Right. Back on to find you amazing things. This marula tree, I look at it every time I drive past and I think about stopping to chat about it. And just look how it's completely rotted away. Now this has come from probably elephants attacking the bark, and that is in turn has led to some kind of disease taking hold of the marula, whether it's from borer beetles. And in fact, you can actually see, if we have a look there in the trunk, you can see all of the holes from the borer beetles and the termites eating through. into the tree itself. The bark is peeled away. This is an old tree that has finally reached the end of its lifespan, and it's very common with marula trees. They've got vastly soft wood in comparison to most of the other tree species. So definitely fairly useless if you ever find yourself in a search for firewood. A marula tree is not the way that you want to go. It burns very quickly, it takes very quickly, but it doesn't make for the best fire. It burns out very rapidly. Very soft wood. Lovely for, also lovely for a very ornamental wood. It's very pretty. But again, you're going to run the risk of borer beetles coming in very quickly. The other aspect of marula bark is that it's a really good antihistamine, which I really feel like I need at the moment, because I've mentioned this yesterday, I walked through a pepper tick nest, and right now, I want to take all of the skin off the top of my foot. It is so itchy. I can't begin to describe it, and it doesn't happen to everyone. There's a couple of us. I know Steph is one person that also reacts the way I do. I cannot find, there's nothing that works. Annie, who's watching in British Columbia, Annie would like to know, as a woman who has worked regularly in fields that are predominantly male-dominated, she would like to know if there are any female animals that exhibit male characteristics apart from, she anticipated my answer there, apart from the spotted hyena's pseudopenis. Annie, I'm going to give that some thought. I'm trying to think. There's not that many good examples out here. Yes, there is actually. That's just because I'm thinking too much. Oh, that's a pity. There was a gymnogene in the tree, but I just didn't quite spot it. An African harrier hawk. Oh well, I actually came around the corner to just have a look at this lovely lady waterbuck. Annie, I have thought about something, and that is the African jacana, which is a bird, and rather than the very typical common the system where males mate with lots of females, also, sorry, I got completely distracted because look who's just come out of the bushes. Look how tiny that is. Right, sorry. So most male birds, or little bird species, either are monogamous or they mate with lots of females. But the African jacana mates with lots of different male partners and leaves them to raise the chicks whilst she goes off and lays her next batch. That's quite a good example. Oh, sorry, this is too sweet. Hello, Mom. Have you just come back to your baby? Waterbuck leave their youngsters for hours at a time, hidden in the bushes. She's obviously just come back to find her little calf. Too cute. Not an easy job being an antelope mom. The males don't tend to play much of a role in protecting their offspring. And it's all up to the female. And that means leaving her herd, or the protection or the safety of her herd, to come and look after this one. Having a good wash now. Reaffirming those bonds that are so essential. Important if you're a little waterbuck calf. Hello, are you curious? To make sure that you know your mom when she comes calling. Look, she's going to wander off. Is the calf going to follow her? Is it going to stay here? Yep, here it goes. While I was busy, and the reason that I slightly lost my train of thought there was that Brent went racing past up a cheetah cut line. I think for now, let's send you onto the back of his vehicle and I will continue on in search of more wonderful, hopefully woman-themed things.
So it looks like Eugenius has been doing some genius things as we are testing how far we can get in Wendy, and it seems like we're in areas that there was no signal in before, so hooray for Eugene. I did hear a report, Jamie was following lion tracks this morning and those lions have been found. There are 3 Birmingham males just down off to my east in Torchwood at First Rock. So unfortunately we will not be seeing them. But for every animal that comes off, there's got to be one that comes in at some point. Oh, Johnny, look how pretty that is. There's just some really pretty clouds there, light coming through. Now, very fluffy clouds, almost look like marshmallows, or sorry, cotton candy, probably a better description. And I wonder who can tell me what type of clouds those are. Who out there knows they're clouds? And if you know what type of cloud it is, those are still small, still building. If you know what type of clouds those are, you can pop me an email on questions@wildearth.tv, or you can use the hashtag Safari Live on Twitter. And if you know what type of clouds those are, let me know. See out there, who out there is budding meteorologists? Go a little bit to the left from there. There's a bigger one slightly. I'll leave the confusion there. And you can see, there we go. That one's started to build a little bit more. We can't see all the cloud behind us, but you can see it's starting to reach up. And when this particular type of cloud does that, it's called anviling. And it forms the shape of an anvil often up top, and you can see that those clouds reaching into the sky. Now that is a little one, and you get massive versions of that, and even the big Boeing commercial jetliners will fly around those clouds. The wind force inside some of those big anvils of a cloud, I nearly gave away the answer to the question too. The winds inside there are able to literally rip the wings off a jumbo jet. And there we go, a little bit of meteorology for the afternoon. And we're quite lucky. It's still really hot, but we just seem to be hiding behind the clouds every now and then. Interesting little fact from Rusty Pipe is in Arizona, during drought conditions, the bark beetle will kill thousands of pine trees. I'm wondering if we do have a similar problem here in Africa. Well, it actually generally happens the inverse in Africa. When we have lots of good rain, there are certain insect species that can really do some damage to even commercial trees, tree plantations like pines and eucalyptuses, and that's a caterpillar called a bagworm. It literally can strip through. But in these droughts, our insects actually almost disappear. Now, it could be the fact that I think, Arizona is also a very arid part of the world, but maybe that specific beetle just specializes in getting nutrients or water out of those pine trees. But I don't know of any insect offhand that does that while we're here. So Elise, Gilly and Elena, you only get 50% for the cloud quiz. You've got half of it right, half of it wrong. You said cumulonimbus. If you just think to cumulus, oh, plated lizard, he's going fast though, Jean-Ray. He stopped there. Now we're going to test Jean-Ray. He's in that little pile of wood. So it looked like a bushveld plated lizard. Really fast. Really, really fast lizard species. And it's very difficult to catch them on camera, unlike their slower moving cousin, the giant plated lizard. Oh, there's a hole. You sneaky devil. There's a hole he went down. I was hoping he was just lying under there, hiding. Alas. But it looks like this is a regularly used part of the world for him. I'm just going to move the vehicle so you can have a look at the tracks. But back to the cumulus clouds. So as I was saying, if you had just said cumulus, you would have been correct. Now, cumulus nimbus. Only when cumulus clouds are producing rain. Nimbus actually means rain. So until they produce rain, they're just cumulus clouds. So go loop-de-loop here. There were, as I got out to try and find that very fast lizard, I noticed that there were, even though I've driven over them, quite a few sets of his tracks here. Zoom in there. There's one there. You can see how he's dragged his tail. And just off to the left, there's another one. So there we go. And there's my footprint there. You can see my shoe mark there. So obviously this hole is used quite often by that bushveld plated lizard. Now I mentioned the cousin, the giant plated lizard, and he's not so shy and retiring as the bushveld plated lizard, and they have a very interesting symbiotic relationship with a dwarf mongoose. And we're going to chat about that a little bit while we move along. So, of course, dwarf mongoose live in multiple different den sites in old termite mounds. And they move around between those different sites. And in some cases, the giant plated lizards will stay either in one or maybe sometimes even move to the others as the mongoose move through. And a lot of you will remember, just as I went on leave last time, I actually stayed on Djuma. I had friends on honeymoon who were staying in the lodge, so I drove them around on safari. And while we were doing that, I managed to catch a picture I've been wanting to catch for a very long time. And that is of a dwarf mongoose with his den mate. So those plated lizards actually feed off the mongoose's feces, so helping the mongoose keep their dens nice and clean, and will even sometimes feed off different parasites and stuff in that den. So keeping it very, very, very clean, but very cool. But it's very seldom you ever see them together. You often see them separately. Where was the holder, Chandra? How's that? Oops, there. And this, for me, is the next one. That's my favorite. It almost looks like the lizard is giving the mongoose a kiss. So I have seen them before when I didn't have my camera at close reach. Actually, almost steal food sometimes out of the mongooses. But in general, it's a very harmonious little relationship they have around those dens. But it's very seldom you'll actually see them both together. So I was very excited about being able to get that photograph. So we just mentioned that my friends who are on their sort of family moon at Djuma, and Luke is sitting back in New York, and he's said, "How's it brew?" So he's picked up a few South Africanisms. It also helps that his wife is South African. And, oh, looks like we're going to have a start of a bit of rutting going on here. But Luke says, thanks for the safari, and now he's addicted to Safari Live as well. And I still owe him wild dogs, and I must get on with finding wild dogs. I hope we do find some on this safari, Luke. Nice to hear from you too, bro. So I just saw a little bit of behavior indicating that these impalas might start rutting. That means the males are going to start chasing each other around, starting to try corral little groups of females before mating starts in earnest. And it might be, the rut might be a little bit late this year with the drought. It hasn't, by now, normally it should have started, but normally it really gets into full swing at the end of the month. What are we now, March or April? Yes, March, yes. So end of March, beginning of April. Sorry, when you live out in the bush, you tend to lose track of days, months, years, those type of things. And come on to the left, see that male rubbing his preorbital gland. So you can see that male there rubbing his preorbital glands up against that little terminalia there. So his hormones might be starting to get up. There are quite a few males in this herd, so maybe not quite yet ready for the full rut. There's a little bit of male following female, but not quite yet. I was hoping to have some of that spectacular and strange noises impala make during the rut. And a lot of first-time safari goers, if they're not in the presence of their guide, when they hear that almost roar of a male impala, think that the lions are on their way at high speed, and are quite often shocked to find out that it is the impala making all that noise. Bye-bye, little impala-las. So we're traversing along the eastern boundary of Djuma, heading towards the Buffalo's Hook boundary. Unfortunately, haven't found any. Oh, we're quickly across to Jamie, who has found something big and scary.
My heart is pounding so fast, and I'm sure Dave's is as well. We came straight around the corner, face to face with one of the Birmingham boys. And he was on the move, he was right at my door. We both got such a fright. Shame, boy. Sorry. It was just a blind corner. He came straight out of the bush into us. There he's walking along there. That was a surprise. He's running. Let's just let him relax a bit. There he goes. It's interesting. That's an odd reaction.
boy making an appearance. Not quite what we're looking for International Women's Day, so maybe he can pretend to be a lady for the day. We're going to now meander towards the Buffalo's Hook waterhole. I believe there is still some water there, so quite exciting. I only just, the last day before I left, I saw a bit of water there. But we do have a stunning sky. I'm just going to edge past these trees, looking out towards the Drakensberg.